Hi there, I'm Diane Callahan, developmental editor and YouTuber, quotidian writer. I'm here again with authors Hero Bowen and Jordan Riley Swan. Both of their names appear on Limelight Larceny, the crew building con, a comedy mystery novel about a community theater group putting on an elaborate con to save their beloved theater. And it's very common for writers to use pen names for the sake of building a certain brand. And I would say it's a little obvious that you're both writing under pseudonyms. But so I want to pick your brains on the topic. So why didn't you write under your legal names?
So as an actor, I've got quite a lot of stuff online under my real name. And I didn't want it to get confusing. So if anyone were to search for the book or whatever, they'd just get like my IMDb page, show reels, all that kind of thing, and it would just get a bit muddled. So I wanted to kind of separate those two parts of my life, but also I kind of wanted to keep my real name for when I finally get something out that's mine, like that's from my, brain and onto the page and whatever, which is hopefully coming soon. But yeah, that's what I kind of wanted to reserve my real name for when I finally get it done.
Yeah, first word to last word, all your creation. Yeah, I could see how it would be nice to have your name on it and no separation between you and the book. When I published my first book, I actually had my real name on it. It was fantasy. So, but I knew I was going to be writing in two genres. I was going to write romance and I was going to be writing fantasy. And some light studying into it indicated that, I wish I could find the articles, but that it was a 40% decrease in romance sales if it had a masculine name, and it was a 40% decrease in fantasy sales if it had a feminine name. It's not right that that's the way it is, but those are built-in prejudices that just come with the writing sphere. You have a lot of guys who just assume if it's a girl writing fantasy, it's not going to be good. And there are a lot of girls who can't write emotion if you're a guy. And I can't write emotion, so they're right about that. But I do need to have a name that can cross both genres, and when you pick the book up, you'll say, okay, you will make an automatic assumption. So I went on to I think it was I can't remember, a website that listed the top 20 androgynous names, and number 3 I think was Riley, and number 8 or 9 or down the list was Jordan. And I'm like, that's it, Jordan. It was initially going to be Riley Jordan, and then it was like Jordan Riley. And the trouble is, there's a famous fantasy author whose last name is Jordan. And I'm like, okay, well, I want a 3-name combo so that Google search doesn't mess things up. Plus, I believe there was also a famous basketball player. And that was a big thing. I needed to make sure that when they searched that name, they were like, the basketball player wrote a romance? I got to read this.
You don't mean Michael Jordan, do you?
No, I don't mean
I was
Michael
gonna say, I was like, there's this kind of famous basketball player called Michael Jordan. Don't know if
You may have heard of him. Yeah.
You may have heard of him. We're corpsing now. We're corpsing.
I know.
Let's call
Yeah,
back to another video.
Use it. Corpsing.
So anyways, so I needed something that would cross genres, and it worked really well. The first romance writers of the convention I went to, I was using my Twitter account, and it didn't have a picture, it just has an image of a key from an old typewriter. And when I was engaging the girls, when they would meet me in person, they'd be like, wait, you're a guy. And I'm like, that's what I wanted to hear every time. And when we get reviews on the book, if it is a fantasy book, or excuse me, if it's a romance book, they will say I like what she did with this, and it's an automatic built-in assumption. So that's why now later we've decided that we needed to separate them a little bit more. Jordan Riley Swan has a very specific style, and now that I am writing fantasy, it's going to go back to my old masculine name, because we don't want to clutter up the Jordan's name with too many volumes of different types of genres. So
Yeah, see, that makes a lot of sense. And Hero, for you, what was your decision-making process with choosing Hero Bowen as a name? I don't know if I've heard the origin story behind it.
So one of the best times of my life was performing Much Ado About Nothing. I played the part of Hero, So that's got a very strong emotional connection to me, is Hero. And I had a very nice review for playing Hero as well. And Bowen is a old family name. So that was just a connection, sort of keep it related to me in a way, but it's a sort of old family name of mine. So yeah, two emotional things coming together.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because Hero Bowen, I see it as sort of masculine, like even though I know Hero is like a female character, obviously, but like I just see it because of the association with Hero as, but I think it's quite funny that it's actually the reverse genders for the authors. So I think that you could look at the cover and you would be like, is Jordan a woman or a man? We don't know, Hero, who knows? And I think that's a really nice thing about it too. So what do you think are important things to consider when choosing a pen name?
For me, it had to have an emotional connection. Otherwise, it would feel like it was just some random person on the front of the book kind of thing. So it had to still relate to me in some way. But I also think, as Jordan said, sometimes you do have to look at the sort of androgyny of a name, if it's depending on what you're trying to sell kind of thing, and what your genres you're working in and things like that. But I do think it should have some kind of personal connection to you as well. Otherwise, it just feels a bit like a ghostwriting situation again, where it's like, I don't know who that person is. That's not me. But yeah.
Makes sense. It needs to be a little bit part of your identity.
Yeah.
And on that, that's why I chose the last name that I did choose for it. When the Jordan Riley was 100% business related when I put that together. But the Swan, that was from a role player from way back, 35 years of role playing. And there's a character that I consistently have show up in the games that I run, and his name's Swan. So when I created Jordan Riley, I did want that emotional touchstone, because I'm going to be signing that who knows how many times, at least 6 times, maybe even 7 times. So I like a 12-year-old schoolgirl who's got a crush, is writing her crush's name. I just sat in books and papers and wrote Swan until I can write it as fast and as quick and as regular as my normal signature. Another decision, though, that really weighed on me was what I'd already mentioned, Google search. I needed to make sure I did not duplicate a famous person, or worse yet, a famous author. And I almost did that. I think one of my first choices, it ended up being in common with a current famous romance author. And I'm like, oh, I need to, because I wasn't going to do androgynous first. I was just going to do a feminine pen name. But then that felt a little deceitful. Like, yeah, that's me. That's do what?
Catfish.
Yeah, it felt it felt like catfishing, and I'm like, no, and that's why I decided to go into androgynous, because I might use it for both fantasy and romance, but it needed to not be duplicated somewhere else.
Yeah, I think it's definitely an important consideration, and yeah, I think it's also interesting. I find that most names still pop up with obituaries, and then I was very happy when my name started being the top thing and there weren't obituaries on the first page of Google. Yeah. Like when I Google myself, and then it'd always be like obituaries, and I'd be like, oh, but then now I've kind of like taken over.
Well, is Diane your real name?
What is it? Well, it's not. So that's the thing. This is my secret identity. So, and then Hero's like, I don't know if Hero's name. I know, it's so secret. But it is the name. It is the name I use professionally all the time. So it definitely feels like my name. And then my last name is kind of similar to my maiden name. So like it has a similar feel. Although
I feel like I don't even know you.
You don't even know me. But yeah, like, because I remember another pen name I was considering was Diane Calloway, and then also Diane Rigby. But then Calloway is a very popular golf club company or something here. So I was like, I can't do that. And then Rigby, I like it because I love the song Eleanor Rigby. But then when I would be like Diane Rigby, they'd be like, well, that sounds like a mystery thriller author or something. And yeah, that's why somebody was like, well, Callahan sounds like it could be, I would definitely see it on the front of a novel and it would sound like some literary bestseller. And I was like, well, that's the name I'm going to go with then. But yeah, so I definitely like Callahan for that reason. And And so,
And if people want to look for an Easter egg, they will always be a reference in every series from, not every book, but every series will have a reference to the Callahan Diner at some point or another. Because I was stuck in my first book and I needed a diner name quick, and she was editing it. So I'm like, oh, well, Callahan Diner, that is. And of course, I get a big note over on the side of the manuscript. This name's awfully familiar.
familiar, yes, yeah, I know. It's a good diner too, the Callahan Diner. I
Callahan
recommend
Diner's
it.
a good diner.
I do, but yeah, I think it's also interesting with the cultural origins of names. Like, you know, you want to be careful not to take something that's from a different culture that's not yours. Because my maiden name is German, and then my married name is Polish, and then both very hard to spell. And then my Callahan is Irish, but you know, like I'm like, oh, I'm like part Irish, like Scots Irish. So like I feel like I can take it without being too like I'm appropriating something that's not mine. But and then I don't really know, like Bowen sounds very English to me, and then Swan sounds very American / English. Yeah.
Swan sounds very made up.
Yeah, but I think they both have very nice rings to them though. Like Jordan Riley Swan, Hero Bowen, they have a nice flow to them. So, but do you remember any other pen names you were considering, like first or last names you were tossing around?
Oh, there was some. Oh, gone dark. I think I was toying with Ophelia for a bit, just because Hamlet obsessive, like I say. And then surnames, it was just sort of like old family names that I was sort of running through. But some of them are got quite a few rare surnames in like my family history, which are like, you get like a handful of them in the UK. So I was like, well, maybe I should use one of those, because then I know for definite that there's nobody. But then I just sort of settled on Bowen because it flowed with hero the best. And I liked that it had like the 2 O's. I know that sounds weird, but when it was written out, I was like, "Ooh, I like that. I like that. That's good."
Aesthetically pleasing on the page.
Yeah. So I think the only other one was Ophelia Bowen, or Ophelia with another family surname. And I was like, that's just being self-indulgent, really. So, yeah.
Do you have any, Diane, do you have any questions coming up about ones to avoid?
For things to avoid with?
Things to avoid.
That's a good question though. That is like, yeah, what are some other things that we should avoid?
Because when you bring up, staying, it should be culturally close to your own name. For business reasons, I strongly also recommend avoiding initials, because the search engines on Amazon do not like initials. So if you're going to use initials, with a J.K. Rowling or a B.F. Miller or what have you, you're going to have a strong last name if you're going to use initial fronts, because the Amazon, Google, they're going to ignore those letters about 99% of the time. So if you do something with a Smith or a Miller and what have you, you need a really, really strong secondary name for the searching, or you are not going to be found.
Yeah, that's tough, especially because it's so common in fantasy to use first 2 initials. Like that's not even like, you know, I see male and female authors and everything in between. Like they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to use initials. And I think, you know, if you're traditionally published, maybe it's easier to get away with that because you have the presence. But then I guess if you're self-publishing, then it's tough. Yeah. So that makes sense. And yeah, I'm trying to think of anything else. I think that definitely knowing what that name is associated with, like in terms of genre, because like I said, like the other names I was considering had sort of different feels in terms of genre. Like, so I surveyed about like 25 strangers. Like I was just like, okay, all these people, here's my list of names. Tell me what genre you associate with it. What does it make you think of? And everything like that. So I had all these different options and I asked them to pick their favorite one. So, I mean, I could have ended up with any number of names. I was just basically choosing my name based on what other people thought sounded the best. And, but which is, yeah, I mean, that can be a good way, like pulling people that you know, and especially people in the book world who are a little familiar with genres. Because like, oh yeah, that sounds like a romance name, or that sounds like a historical fiction name, because there are certain names that sound more like they belong to one genre than another.
Yeah.
Like the Rigby name. That Rigby really does sound like a thriller mystery.
Yeah, when you see me coming out my Diane Rigby books for my mystery thriller label, yeah. But so yeah, on that note, are there any other famous author pen names that you admire, or stage names, or anything like that?
George Eliot comes to mind for me, just because big fan, and it's quite a famous one writing wise. At a time when, well, it's the same thing. She knew she wouldn't sell under a female name, so she used a male name and became quite successful. But
Yeah, I think I have
hopefully-
a George Eliot.
which one do you have?
This
can't
is like
see
a
it.
poetry collection. So
Oh,
It's a beautiful gold gilt cover.
it is. It's
yeah.
like timey, but yeah, that's very true. I
Yeah.
think that is that's a common thing with women having to write under male pen names,
Yeah.
especially back in
And
the
that-
day.
And then I was weirdly, so I was doing like a walk down memory lane, and there was this set of books when I was a kid, and I couldn't for the life of me remember what they were called or who wrote them, but they were like the first set of books that I was like, this is delicious, I need more. And then finally, after doing like a random search on Google of like kids in a small town, there was a Dairy Queen, creatures, that kind of thing, you know, and you're just like trying everything. And it came up with the name, and it was the Spooksville series by Christopher Pike. And I remember just loving them. And then I looked into him, and he's got a pen name, and I had no idea that he's got one, and it's worked out quite well for him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's actually more common than it seems for people to
Yeah.
have pen names. But I like it when authors have sort of like a separate identity, that they're using J.D. Robb and Nora Roberts, like she has like different labels for different genres, but you know, she's very
Yeah.
open about it. But I think I love the story with Stephen King taking on the Richard Bachman
Oh
persona.
yeah.
Like, that's amazing, because he was trying to see if he could get like, is this luck or is it skill?
Yeah,
So he
yeah.
wanted to make his own way, but then, you know, the problem was that people knew his writing so well that one of the booksellers read his book, and it figured out it was him, and went to the Library of Congress and like confirmed, and then called up King. So he didn't last for very long under that pen name. Yeah, that's what he wrote Running Man under, and he was going to publish Misery under Richard Bachman as well, but you know, once it got his real name was found out, then all those books sold incredibly well. And but yeah, I always love hearing the stories behind the names that people choose and everything like that. So it's interesting to hear yours too. I feel like I learned some things that I haven't asked you guys before, so that's good. But we have our two pen names on the cover of Limelight and Larceny here, and beautifully rendered. So this is available in print, an ebook, and audiobook with our wonderful full cast. So yeah, we really can't wait to show you what other collaborative projects we have. So you'll see a lot of two names on the cover of our various pen names, but they are real people, as you can see
They're real
here.
people.
They're real people. Oh my gosh.
Wait. Are we certain? I mean, she did say several times she's an actress.
Mhm.
So maybe we just hired her to.
Yes, she's pretending to be a writer, and that's what's going on here. So yeah, but we can't wait to show you what else we have here growing in our story garden.
No.